Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this noon webinar on the new electric vehicle demand response program in Rhode Island. We have two sort of brief presentations today and then lots of time for Q&A if you have any questions, but we'll go ahead and launch right in. Quick intro, if you're not familiar with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a nonprofit organization working across both Rhode Island and Massachusetts to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. What that means is we run a bunch of different programs and services that help people access clean energy technologies, including electric vehicles. And we also do public policy advocacy work at the state level in both states to make sure we've got the policies on the books that we need to meet our emissions reductions requirements. So that's who we are. So we're giving this presentation as part of our larger Drive Green electric vehicle program. My name is Anna, and I am our electric vehicle program director, but I'm joined by two other people who I will let introduce themselves, who will be doing most of the speaking today.
Hi, I'm Tina. Thank you, Anna, for the little introduction. I am the Rhode Island Policy Advocate for Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and I'll spend a couple slides going over some detail on New England's energy demand, demand response, and then pass it over to our guest, Allison Archambault.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Allison Archambault. I'm a senior program manager with Rhode Island Energy for our electric transportation and residential demand response programs. So I'm happy to be here today.
We're very happy that you're joining us today. Some quick Zoom basics are you, the attendees, are muted throughout the presentation to avoid background noise. But we do absolutely encourage your participation. So please use the Q&A function that you'll see on your little Zoom window to ask questions. We'll make sure to go through them at the end. If you would like to use closed captions, you should also see a button on the bottom of your Zoom screen that says CC. If you click that, you'll see text appear at the bottom of the screen as we speak. And we will share slides and a recording of this webinar after the webinar by email, so you can look out for that. I'll shortly hand it over to Tina, but quick sort of level setting, what are we going to learn today? We're going to go over demand response. What does that mean? Why is it important? And then we're going to talk specifically about Rhode Island Energy's new program, how it works, how to enroll, what the benefits are, and all that. So with that, I will pass it over to Tina.
Thank you, Anna. So like she said, my next couple of slides will go into our electric demand and our electric system here in New England. So Anna, if you could pass it over to the next slide, we're going to show this image from ISO New England. And this shows how our electricity demand varies throughout the year. So depicted on this graph, we have several months of New England's electric demand from December of last year through to October of this year. And all of the bars represent in megawatts how much energy, how much electricity our New England region has demanded. And those three orange bars right in the middle show the summer months. And as you can see, demand in those 3 months is almost reaching 25,000 megawatts. So demand in the summer months is higher because New England has primarily a summer peaking system, which means our electricity demand and the demand from the grid is highest in the summer, and that's primarily due to being driven by air conditioning and cooling. So in the next slide, we can see how demand for electricity can also be analyzed on a monthly and hourly basis. So these two slides just compare a normal summer day. So these images were from ISO New England's app ISO To Go from 2021. And in that first image, you can see that even on individual summer days, demand can fluctuate by hour. So in this first graph, it should be on the left, demand reaches a peak around 6 p.m. in the day of 15,000 megawatts, and that's pretty average for our region in the summer. And right in the middle hours, from probably 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., demand is pushed down by solar generation, and that's because solar panels are able to produce electricity, and homes and businesses can draw on that power. So overall, there's less demand on our grid. By contrast, in the second graph on this screen, you can see that demand really starts to ramp up around 8 a.m. and then peaks around probably 4, 5, 6 p.m. When people are returning from work. And this peak day on June 7th has demand reaching almost 23,000 megawatts. And that can be due to heat waves, those record-breaking temperatures that cause all of New Englanders in our region to be turning on their air conditioning or attending or going to cooling facilities. And so our grid has to work a lot harder to serve all those customers that want to cool their homes. So while traditionally fracked gas handles the peak on a normal day, you can see a resource mix that's used to meet our electricity demand by hour. And so those resources are selected approximately every 5 minutes of every single day by the team at ISO New England. That's the independent system operator of New England that controls the region's grid. And so they work very hard to choose the right resources that meet regional demand, and they serve to supply that demand. However, in this graph, you can see predominantly we're served by natural gas, and that peaks again around 6 p.m. when people are returning from work. And so generally, this is a typical resource mix throughout the year, and natural gas can serve to meet that fluctuating demand because natural gas power plants can turn on and power up generally a bit quicker than other sources of power. And for some state context, in 2021, Rhode Island generated approximately 83% of its electricity from natural gas. And in 2023, Massachusetts generated about 76% of its electricity from natural gas. However, if you remember those peak day images, we have to bring on even more natural gas and dirtier fuels like coal and oil to meet our electricity demands. And here at Green Energy Consumers, we're really focused on reducing state emissions in line with our climate goals, which is why these peak days can be so concerning from an emission standpoint. So on this day, you can see that we have a larger percentage of electric demand being met by natural gas, and you also have oil represented in brown and coal being represented in black, which are fuels that need to be dispatched in order to fully meet the electricity demands in the region. So although on these peak days, ISO New England is still capable of meeting regional demand, and in a best case scenario, the region doesn't encounter blackouts, we are still dispatching really dirty fuels from generation centers called peaker plants in order to meet demand. And these peaker plants cause outsized public health and climate impacts because these are some of our dirtiest power plants that are some of the least efficient and also most expensive energy sources. However, they're called on to run because they can ramp up their production very quickly. And in addition, those public health impacts can cause conditions such as Alzheimer's, asthma, kidney and heart disease. And peaker plants tend to be located near historically disadvantaged communities, which can further serve to impact already marginalized communities. And for reference, Rhode Island has about 2 peaker plants, and Massachusetts has about 29 peaker plants. So these plants don't run very often. Usually around 2 to 7% of the hours in a year are being served by peaker plants. However, they cause a lot of health impacts, and they also cost us a lot of money. So these system peaks can be incredibly expensive. Here you can see the increased cost associated with peaks in our region. For reference, the red curve is the demand curve for a summer peak day, and the blue curve just represents the demand curve for a normal day. However, when you look at the blue and red bars on the bottom, you can see the blue bars are relatively consistent throughout the day. However, those red bars really show how cost can fluctuate extremely high and low throughout the day based on what resources we are dispatching. So there is a real disproportionate impact on prices during these peak days. We might have demand that reaches 2 times our traditional demand on a peak day. However, costs can be about 10 times as high, which can really impact ratepayers. So even though this graph on the right y-axis shows wholesale electricity prices. Those still get reflected in the consumer prices that all ratepayers pay. And so it was found actually in a Massachusetts study that only about 1% of the hours in a year account for 8% of the costs of running the electric grid, and only 10% of the hours account for 40% of the cost. So in this context, it really illustrates the point that by curbing our peak demand, we can have less of those high cost hours occurring. And that comes from reducing the need for those peaker plants to turn on and ramp up production, because that is what tends to cost ratepayers a lot. And those peaker plants, since they only operate for around 2 to 7% of the hours in a year, we are just playing an expensive game to ensure that we have enough power to meet our demand, instead of first trying to reduce our demand on the electric grid. So this context leads me to a program we run at Green Energy Consumers Alliance called Shave the Peak. And this is a voluntary program, which is another tool to help empower consumers like all of you attendees, just to become more aware of A, what resources are fueling our energy mix, and then B, how we can all help reduce our demand on the grid. So we do this through, like I said, voluntary signups, and you can receive conservation alerts on those peak days. And you can also join other like-minded conservationists in order to just see what you can do to help reduce demand in your own life. And I'll pass it back to my colleague Anna to go into a little more depth on Rhode Island Energy's new EV demand response program and how electric vehicles can play a big part in demand response.
Thank you, Tina, for all that background. So when you sign up for Shave the Peak, you're basically agreeing to get text messages or emails on those peak days, the handful of days in the summer when demand is really, really high. And those messages basically say, if you can, turn up your AC a couple degrees or turn it off completely, or delay using a dishwasher or washing machine, that would be great for the grid and for all of us. And all of those things are actions that you can take voluntarily. Electric vehicles are a particularly powerful tool in shaving the peak for a couple of reasons. So, oops, if I go to my next slide. Electric vehicles use a lot of energy. Those batteries need to move those vehicles around, so they are all somewhere between like 60 and 100 kilowatt hours of capacity. But the beauty of EVs is that you can shift the load relatively easily. And what I mean by that is basically decide to move when you charge your EV to a different time. Because for folks who are able to charge at home, what you care about in the morning is that you have enough power to drive where you need to go. You don't really care if you charged from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. or 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. as long as your vehicle is ready to go. And with level 2 chargers, the ones that charge a little bit faster at home, you can shift when you charge really easily without feeling an impact as a consumer. The second sort of beauty of EVs is that you don't have to think about it. You can schedule your charging through your vehicle or through your smart home charging stations. Allison will talk more about how the Rhode Island program works specifically, but when you are on the Shave the Peak program, for example, you can get a message and say, okay, I'm going to go physically unplug my car now, or you can just schedule it through the app on your phone to make sure that you generally don't charge during peak times at all. So because they're a large load, you can shift them easily and you can do all of this automatically. They present a really big opportunity for peak shaving, or at least not exacerbating the peak as we get more and more EVs online. I'll say that for the energy nerds on the call, the sort of future of this is bidirectional charging. I know that some folks are really excited about that. We're not quite there yet, but we can see a future where not only do EVs not charge during peaks, but maybe they discharge during peaks. This is already happening with some medium and heavy duty fleet vehicles through the ConnectedSolutions program in Massachusetts. We're really hoping to see more and more of that because these are big batteries that we could use to balance out supply and demand on the grid. But to bring it back to the program we're going to talk about today, anytime you stop or curtail or slow charging during peak event, that's a type of demand response. So demand response, if this is a term that you haven't heard before, is a term to describe any strategy that reduces peak energy. In Rhode Island Energy has the ConnectedSolutions program that currently already administers different types of demand response programs. So we're talking here about smart thermostats that adjust the temperature without you even noticing. We're talking about battery storage if you have a home energy battery unit and it can discharge electricity back onto the grid, or slow charging. That's a type of demand response. And now what Allison is going to tell us about, now electric vehicles and EV charging are one of the options under that larger demand response ConnectedSolutions program. So I think with that, one last note I should make is that there's a lot of sort of terms flying around here. We've talked about peak shaving, we've talked about demand response. This is all also known as smart or managed charging. These are sort of umbrella terms that overlap a little bit. If you've heard of smart charging or managed charging before, these are programs that incentivize or actively shift the demand from electric vehicles to off-peak times. Sometimes this is done with an off-peak charging rebate, which some of you may be familiar with because National Grid offered that in Rhode Island a couple of years ago. So this is not the same program as what you might remember from National Grid, but it has the similar aim in terms of demand response and peak shaving. So with all of that context, I will turn it over to Allison to tell us more about the demand response program from Rhode Island Energy.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna and Tina. It was a perfect segue to the program that we'll be offering at Rhode Island Energy. So thank you for having me on today to discuss Rhode Island Energy's new electric vehicle demand response program. We also are calling it EVDR. I've been working in the EV space since 2014 and have partnered with Green Energy Consumers Alliance on multiple National Drive Electric Week events, and I'm always in awe of their programs, advocacy work, and EV advocates like many of you on the call. During this time, I've met so many people, those seeking just to learn more, someone interested in a new car, and even those who you know who you are, who analyze your own charging data. So you're all such knowledgeable experts in your own way and help educate family and friends about your own experiences and on EVs and clean energy programs. So I'm excited to share the details of our new program with you. So our new program, here's an overview of our ConnectedSolutions program. It's Rhode Island Energy's electric demand response program. It's branded ConnectedSolutions, and it's offered by Rhode Island Energy to help keep the electricity grid running smoothly, especially during times when lots of people are using electricity. There are two tracks through which our customers may participate. That's through our residential and small business track. And then for our larger customers, it's our commercial and industrial C&I track. Under each track, there are different pathways. We also see them as programs as well. Through residential and small business, we have our thermostats, our battery energy storage dispatch, and the new program, which will be our focus today, EVDR. And then for our larger customers, they can participate through daily dispatch or targeted dispatch. We also, similar to Green Energy Consumers Alliance Shave the Peak program, we're looking to voluntarily encourage customers to reduce energy load during demand response events. This is going to be done through our social media, newsletters, and email notifications. To participate in the residential and small business track, you must be an electric customer with a rate of, or in the rate classes of A16, A60, or C6. So you can kind of think similarly to what Anna and Tina presented, ConnectedSolutions as a team effort to manage energy use more smartly, and you get rewarded for being flexible. And you can participate through those various connected devices. So here's how the EV DR ConnectedSolutions pathway or program works. So an EV driver enrolls in ConnectedSolutions and agrees to reduce energy use in times of highest energy demand. The electricity demand surges, like mentioned, during those hot summer days when everyone's turning on their ACs. And then at Rhode Island Energy's direction, participating customers' EV or EV charger will receive a signal and briefly adjust your charging speed during a peak energy or demand response event. The reduced demand helps balance supply and demand and stabilizes the grid. And in return, participating customers receive an incentive for their participation. Just to note that if an event ever occurs at a time that is inconvenient, you can always opt out and override the event at any time by adjusting your EV charger settings via the vehicle, plug or the app at any time. Next slide, please. So going into the eligibility and enrollment process. To be eligible for the program, you must be a Rhode Island Energy residential or small business electric customer. Those are rate classes A16, A60, and C6 for our small businesses. Have an approved EV or EV charger installed and activated with Wi-Fi connectivity at your residence. And as a participant, you agree to allow Rhode Island Energy to pause charging during those peak energy events. And then to enroll, you must enroll your EV or EV charger in the program by visiting our enrollment site, and that is www.chargingrewards.com/road/island/energy/EV. So you'll go to our enrollment site. You will see some buttons to select your specific EV or EV charger that you'd like to enroll. You'd click there and then follow the prompts according to your OEM or EV and EV charger. Next slide, please. So over the course of the summer, from June 1st to September 30th, on hot summer afternoons when air conditioning usage spikes, causing electricity demand to surge, we may call on your device or devices if you're enrolled with thermostats or batteries to help reduce demand during those high demand hours. We will try to provide you with 24-hour advance notice when we call on your participation for the program. The notifications will vary by OEM, and on our FAQ page, it goes into more details for each EV or EV charger enrolled and how you may receive those notifications. For EVs, we may call on your device up to 60 times over the course of the summer. These events will take place between the hours of 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. and last either 2 or 3 hours in duration. And your charging will be paused for those 2 or 3 hours and then automatically resume according to your settings. And like I mentioned before, you can always opt out fully or at any time by changing your settings on your vehicle or charger. Next slide, please. So here's a list of approved EVs and EV chargers supported by the program. On the left-hand side, you can see the different providers. We have Tesla, ChargePoint, Emporia, EVO Charge, and Wallbox. And then on the right-hand side of the table, you will see all the makes and models that are approved and supported by the program. We recognize that the EV list is small, but if your EV doesn't qualify for the program, you can still participate with an approved EV charger. If you don't have an EV charger installed yet, there are incentives available through the State Office of Energy Resources Power Up Rhode Island program. And they have 2 rebates, standard, which will cover up to 50% or $700 off the purchase and installation costs. And then for income qualified residents, up to 75% or $1,000 of your purchase and installation costs of a charger. And you can check out more information on their program page and the application process and all of that at drive.ri.gov/powerup Rhode Island. So how will you receive an incentive for participating in this program? Once a customer's enrollment is accepted, you will receive a $50 virtual prepaid MasterCard. This will be sent to your email. If you do not claim it in your email after multiple attempts of trying to get you to claim your card, a physical MasterCard will be mailed to your address. And then at the end of the summer, as a thank you for your participation, you'll receive an additional $20 virtual prepaid MasterCard. And then just to note, a customer must be enrolled on or before August 15th to receive an incentive for the current summer season. So that $20 at the end of the summer season. Next slide, please. Okay, so what to expect since we're in December, no one's really thinking about those hot summer months unless you're going on vacation soon. But every day during the summer from June 1st to September 30th, Rhode Island Energy program administrators meet with other New England utilities and utilize various forecasting tools to determine when an energy demand is expected to reach or exceed a threshold. So we meet, just to give you some information of behind the scenes, what's happening. We meet at noon every day and determine if we need to schedule demand response events. And this is for our various connected solutions, pathways, the thermostats, batteries, EVs, and also for our commercial and industrial customers. So we'll call upon those devices enrolled in our program to reduce energy use during times of high demand periods. And this helps ensure that the grid remains balanced and reliable. For EVDR participants, you should receive 24-hour notice of each demand response event. And this will vary by OEM how the notification will come into you. So please visit our FAQ page on the enrollment site. We can schedule up to 60 events between June 1st and September 30th. The events can be 2 or 3 hours long and occur between 3 and 8 p.m. During an event, the charging will be limited, but you can always remain in control and override the event at any time, so your vehicle's ready when you need it. And then just to note, we will be running a test event at some point in the coming months. Since this is a new program for us, we want to ensure that everything's working properly. So the test event will help us understand and analyze some data that comes in and troubleshoot any issues that do arise. And then I guess I'll just give you some insight into what we're seeing so far. So some of you on the webinar may have already enrolled in our program, so thank you. You are one of 109 devices enrolled as of this morning. Our goal for 2025 is a little over 1,200 devices enrolled. So just to give some insight on why we chose that number, for utility programs, utilities usually see around 10% of all EV drivers participating in customer utility offered programs. So we have roughly 14,000 EVs registered in the state right now. So we're hoping to really target you as EV drivers or new EV drivers to participate. So we have some lofty enrollment goals, and we hope that all of you can help achieve that. So here's my contact information on the slide. And then if you have additional questions about the EVDR program, you can also send an email to our ConnectedSolutions customer service team at Rhode Island Energy at energyhub.com. So I'll open it up for questions.
I'll come back real quick to just do a couple closing slides, and then we'll just do questions for the rest of the time. So if you're curious about electric vehicles in general, whether you have one or not, or want to follow some of the state policy work that we're doing or the larger market developments, we definitely want to encourage you to check out our blog at greenenergyconsumers.org/blog. We write a lot about a lot of different clean energy topics, but we try and make sure to post things in particular that target consumers, like what you need to know, what programs you need to be aware of, how you can engage in this sort of larger transition. So I wanted to give a plug, pun intended, for our blog. And then let's see, I'm somewhat contractually obliged to say we are a nonprofit organization. We really think it's important to make educational opportunities like this available for free to the public, and would, of course, be very grateful for any donation you are willing and able to give. It's that time of year, so I definitely have to spend some time on this slide. And then finally, if you want to engage with green energy consumers further, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can subscribe to our blog. You can follow us on social media, Instagram, but also Facebook and Twitter or X. We've got a Drive Green community Facebook group. I see a couple of the people on this webinar are active members of that group, but that's a great place to go if you want to talk to some real EV drivers and ask some questions about their experience or share news or just learn more about the technology and have a sense of community while doing it. And then we've also got a newsletter and a pledge that you can sign if you want to get more engaged. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see what questions we've gotten. Okay, first one is for you, Allison. Do you think other OEM chargers, so OEM, for those who don't know that phrase, is original equipment manufacturer. So basically, will other manufacturers like Ford and GM become approved for the program soon?
Yeah, we're exploring different avenues to add more OEMs. At this point, our list is what I shared today. As new OEMs do get approved for integration into our program, there's some like contractual stuff that has to happen behind the scenes to get new providers on the list. Those will be added to our website and we'll be able to enroll. But at this time, our list is as is.
I'll say that there's been various iterations of various EV focused programs from the utilities in Massachusetts and Rhode Island over the years. And it's always been this same sort of pattern that the program launches with a certain number of enabled or eligible technologies, and over time more are added. So hope to see the same thing with this one. Another question is, for municipal public chargers, could the utility offer a time of use price that would incentivize drivers to use the chargers during non-peak periods with cheaper rates?
Great question. So we have another team working on kind of time of use or a new rate case. So, excuse me, as a utility, we haven't submitted a rate case since 2017, which became effective in 2018. Our team is working on developing a new rate case likely to be submitted for regulatory approval in Q4 of 2025. Our EV team is part of those discussions. Again, we have another team kind of leading the effort, but our EV team is part of the discussions. A lot of forecasting and inputs like market trends and programs, et cetera, factor into the development of a rate case. So while we're at the initial stage of those conversations, I don't anticipate Rhode Island Energy offering an EV specific time of use rate, but again, we're at the initial stages, so those conversations will continue.
I want to take one step back slightly for folks who might not have heard of the concept of a time of use rate before. There's the idea of right now, as a consumer of electricity, you're paying a flat fee per kilowatt hour regardless of when you use it, despite the fact that, as Tina showed on that one graph, electricity prices vary throughout the day. And so the concept of time of use rates or time varying rates is that the variation in those prices would be reflected on the rates that you, the consumer, pays. So you might pay a certain per kilowatt hour fee on off-peak times and a certain per kilowatt hour fee on peak times to encourage people to shift their demand to periods when demand is low. This can be either a whole home sort of time of use rate if you've got a smart meter, which is a whole can of worms we can get into another time, or you can have targeted time of use rates or time varying rates for electric vehicles. And so it's another tool in this toolbox of how do we shift load. And the thing that I want to stress is that it benefits everybody if electric vehicle drivers charge off peak. So sometimes people are like, why should my neighbor get lower electricity price or get an incentive to charge off peak? That's not fair. But it actually benefits all of us to shift demand to off-peak times, and we'll all see that in terms of lower electricity rates. So this makes sense for an individual driver, but also big picture makes sense for all of us to shift as much load as we can off those really expensive peak days or peak moments. There's another question from someone who's recently bought an Emporia EV charger, which has the option to charge on, quote, excess solar generation from their home solar system. This seems like something to generate a warm and fuzzy feeling in the owner rather than help with network level demand response, since it actually shifts usage into the day. Am I correct, or am I missing something, is the question.
Great question. I think it depends. I'm not really set up to speak on how each OEM offers their individual programs. It depends on how you would like to utilize and charge your EV. If you feel like you want to have full control of charging off of your own solar that's produced on your system, then yes, like that's great. Some other people don't care about that as much. From what I've had discussions with some battery energy storage customers. So it kind of depends. I'm sorry I'm skirting around the answer, but I don't want to, speak badly or the best of any sort of EV type program.
I'll jump in and say that the environmental attributes of the energy that you are producing with your solar power belong to whoever owns the renewable energy certificate, basically, that your solar is producing. So who can claim that that solar energy it's kind of irrelevant whether you plug your EV in or not, because it's the owner of the energy certificate. But more practically, I think if that solar energy is going out onto the grid. If you plug your car in, sure, the actual electrons might flow into your vehicle, but if you hadn't plugged your car in, they would go towards some other necessary in that moment demand, whether that's air conditioning or keeping your fridge running, anything like that. So I think looking at a bigger system picture right now, what we need to do is get demand off those peak days. And I think one thing that might help with this question, and this is a super energy nerdy question, so I appreciate it, is that we use the word peak to describe a daily phenomenon, but also like a yearly system phenomenon. So on a normal day that isn't a peak day, it might make sense to shift your usage to when the sun is shining, because why not? But on those system peak days that we're talking about with this program, we need to get everything we can off those peak hours so that the solar that you are producing goes towards really critical needs and not anything that can be shifted. So I would say if you want to do that on a daily basis, why not? But overall, it's just best to charge off peak, and particularly on those system peak days.
Great response. And then I also like to kind of add, if people are either unwilling or unable to participate or absent of any other like customer incentive type programs, one question I get a lot is, when is the best time to charge my vehicle? And I'm sure Green Energy Consumers Alliance has done multiple blogs and webinars on this. But for those, like a simple answer, for those of us not looking at ISO New England Express real-time demand or price maps, obviously charging needs to be convenient for you. You need your car ready when you need it. But we will say that during those low demand times, typically from 9 p.m. to like 6 a.m., charging during those times can be more cost effective and reduce strain on the grid. And then also at times of high renewable energy production, like today on those sunny days, If anyone was looking at the ISO New England app today, yeah, we saw some demand prices that were extremely low. But this also supports when we're plugging in our cars during high renewable energy production. It also supports a cleaner grid and reduces the carbon footprint of our charging.
That is the full list of questions. Oh, actually, not true. Question. If I charge my vehicle from an ordinary outlet in my home, which I'm interpreting to mean a level 1 charging situation, how do I participate in this program?
Yeah, so I'm one of you. I don't have an EV charger installed in my house yet. I do all of my charging on that regular outlet in my garage. Unfortunately, at this time, unless you have a Tesla, you won't be eligible for the program at this time, unless you install an EV level 2 charger.
And just to underline that the reason for that is that the Rhode Island Energy needs data to prove or to needs access to the vehicle to make the charging stop. And Tesla is the only one that you have an agreement with to do that so far. So I want to stress that, like, in an ideal world, you would be able to, but it's just a slow process to get those contracts signed, I imagine.
Yeah. And that Wi-Fi connectivity helps with that. You know, we send the signal to your charger to pause charging during our demand response event times.
I want to stress again, though, that the Office of Energy Resources has an incentive program. So if you want to install a level 2 charger, there's some funding available through that Power Up Rhode Island program to bring down the costs of installing a charger at home. Whether you live in a single family home or a multifamily home, that funding is available. Okay, I think this time we've reached the end of the question. So is there anything either of you would like to add or close out with?
Well, just thank you for having
One
me
more
today.
question. Sorry, every time I say that there's no more questions, one more question shows up. So somebody asked, do I need a separate meter to participate in the program?
No, not at this time. Nope. If you have an approved EV or EV charger, we're good to go with that. You do not need a separate meter.
Okay, now you can say your closing thoughts.
So I just wanted to thank you for having me. I'm really glad for people joining us probably on their lunch break today. Feel free to reach out. You have my contact information, really anything EV related, not even just specifically EVDR. Happy to connect with you all. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on your lunch break, I'm sure. And we'll send out a recording as soon as we've got it uploaded to YouTube. Sorry, Tina, if you wanted to add anything, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to everybody that attended. And like Anna said, you can always keep in touch with us at Green Energy via our blogs, newsletters. We post on a whole host of topics. So, if there's something you're interested in related to energy or the environment, I'm sure you can find something on our blog page or in any of the events we host. So make sure to keep an eye on that. And if you have an EV and are eligible for the program, I hope you look into it. Thank you.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Take care.